Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second phase of our community engagement sessions. My name is Megan Gray. I'm here with my colleague Roseanne Bailey from the Toronto Police Service, who will be your moderators for this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to call on Phil Johnson from Taibu Community Health Center, who will provide us with our land acknowledgement.
Hi, good evening, everybody. We acknowledge the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many First Nations and Indigenous peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa lands. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements, and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island. These treaties and other agreements, including the One Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, are agreements to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. Other Indigenous nations and all settlers, including us, are invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. We remain mindful of broken covenants, and we strive to make this right with the land and with each other. We call on the various governments of Canada to seek reconciliation with our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and that we all uphold and respect their rights, including fair and equitable compensation for all historical injustices. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. We are grateful to the Taibu Community Health Center and our community partners at the Asian Court Community Services Association for agreeing to co-host this evening's virtual town hall meeting. I'd now like to ask Sharon from the Asian Court Community Services Association to bring some brief greetings. Okay, we're just having some technical difficulties. Phil, we're just going to come back to you as well to bring some brief greetings on behalf of Taibu.
Hi, so good evening, everybody, and thank you for those who are participating in tonight's session. Very glad that you are back here to hear what the TPS has learned and are about to share with us. We all know that, when we had this initial meeting back in January and February, this was all before COVID, so we couldn't have possibly anticipated that we'd be back here tonight using some sort of virtual medium to share our results. So I'm glad that we're back, and I'm glad that we're continuing this important work, and thankful that you guys have participated and continue to participate in this process. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil. I'll now ask Sharon to bring some brief greetings.
Hi, my name is Sharon from Asian Court Community Services. I'd just like to welcome everyone for coming, and I'm kind of just glad to be here and to hear what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. We appreciate again that we've been able to co-host this event with both of your community agencies, and appreciate the support for the Toronto Police Service's efforts to engage with the community. Before we get started this evening, I just wanted to provide you with an overview of the conversation we're going to have tonight. First, you're going to hear from Deputy Chief of Police, Peter Ewan, who will provide an overview of our engagement efforts to date. You will then hear from Dr. Mai Fan and Ms. Miha Dinkapanescu from our Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights team. They will join Deputy Ewan as well in sharing the next steps of our race and identity-based data collection strategy. It's at that time that we'll ask for your input on those areas, and we will open the line to questions. We know this is certainly a different forum than what we are used to. Last year when we did our community engagements, we were able to meet in person. Obviously, that's not possible at this time. So thank you to those who have joined us on YouTube and are watching our live stream. and to those who have joined on WebEx for a more interactive experience. We'd ask you, when it comes time to answer the questions that we're going to be posing, that you use the raise hand function on WebEx. Alternatively, you can type your question into the chat, and either Roseanne or myself will ask it on your behalf. We will also have a couple of questions that are more survey-like or poll-like, I believe, at the end. And again, we'll just be asking you to informally respond by using the raised hand function. If you do have any questions that are related to a personal policing matter or a local policing issue, we'd ask you to just identify yourself in the chat section, and we will ensure that your questions are redirected. We have representation from our 3 Scarborough divisions on this call this evening. 41, 42, and 43 division are all represented. We will make sure that you're in contact with them. Really, we would like to spend this evening between now and 8:30 discussing race-based data strategy. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over the microphone to Deputy Chief of Police, Peter Ewan.
Thank you, Megan, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Phil and Sharon from our community agencies for assisting us in having this important conversation with our community members. And Phil was absolutely correct. Trust and acknowledge our past mistakes. We're here to build trust, not to erode it. These conversations are long overdue. Are they easy to have? Of course not. They are very uncomfortable. Talking about race and policing has been uncomfortable for a long time, and that is perhaps why it has taken us so long to get here. But here we are. We're here because we want to get rid of systemic racism in policing. We aren't the only one looking at how we can collect race-based data. The child welfare system is doing it. The education system is doing it. We are all doing this because we have recognized that systemic racism exists in these institutions. But in order for us to get rid of it, we need to understand it and eliminate it. One of the most powerful takeaways for me from the last round of town hall meetings with each and every one of you on this subject was from a community member who said to us, policing must be present looking at us in the eyes and realizing what we have been through. I am a racialized person myself. I have experienced racism throughout my lifetime and also systemic racism since I joined the Toronto Police Service. We acknowledge it exists. Am I saying I can relate to the experience of a young Black man who is pulled over for speeding? No, I cannot. Am I saying I can relate to the experiences of a South Asian man? No, I cannot. But one thing I do know we all have in common is that we all have experienced systemic racism. For some of you, this may be the first time joining us for these discussions, so I want to bring you up to date. In 2017, Ontario's Anti-Racism Act was passed, and cross-party support to establish legal framework for eliminating systemic racism and advancing racial equity. Further, in April of 2018, the provincial government mandated the collection of race-based data by organizations in the public sector, like I mentioned earlier, child welfare, education, and justice sectors, and established the anti-racism data standards to provide guidance on the collection and analysis of the data. In response to this standard, the Toronto Police Services Board worked with stakeholders to develop and inform a new policy to identify, monitor, eliminate potential systemic racism through the collection of race-based data. I think we should be on slide number 1. Sorry, once again, technical difficulties. There we go. All right, so the last 2 minutes I talked about why we're here tonight, 2017, 2018, the legislation and getting to where we are today. As we go forward, our Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit is working with all relevant areas of the service to establish training, procedures, implementing plans and guidance on the recording, storing, analyzing, and reporting of this data. Slide number 2, please. As you know, for the last few years, the Toronto Police Service has been undertaking a major modernization effort that will create a police service that is consistent, accountable, transparent, inclusive, and community-focused. Race-based data collection is the next logical step in a discussion that the Toronto Police Service has been having for years about how to best support our members to ensure that they are delivering equitable, fair, and non-discriminatory policing service. We know how important it is to get this right. We must assure our communities that this data will allow the service to understand how our actions impact them and make operational decisions that would minimize over-policing, manage implicit bias, and help address suggestions of racial profiling. We must also be mindful of privacy concern, work with our oversight framework that is rooted in integrity and professionalism. We will implement measures to ensure that race-based data is only available to specifically designated and trained members. We'll consider a retention policy to ensure we are only keeping race-based data for an appropriate time, and will consider the impact of freedom of information requests. We have also committed to analyzing and reporting race-based data only after all personal identifiers have been removed. Phase 1 of our strategy started on January 1st, 2020. We began collecting race-based data for use of force incidents using the forms that have been prescribed by the province and strip searches. The data is being collected using an officer's perception based on prescribed categories. Phase 2 is what we're here to tell you about today, and we'll get into these areas later. Next slide, please. Community engagement represents an integral part of this strategy. Over the period of 2019 to February 2020, we engaged in our largest community engagement endeavor ever to raise awareness about the race-based data collection strategy, and gather public feedback to inform TPS decisions throughout the implementation process. During that time, I had the pleasure to attend a number of town hall meetings and meet many people across this great city of ours. A multi-pronged approach guided the service community engagement to ensure feedback from a geographic and demographic diversity of voices. It represents the concerted effort of various units across the Toronto Police Service. A series of 69 engagement opportunities led by 30 community organizations brought together over 880 members of diverse communities to voice their opinions about the service race-based data collection strategy. The map shows the location of community consultations across the city. 4 public town hall took place in neighborhoods representing different areas of this city: Alexandra Park, Black Creek, Regent Park, and Malvern. About 60 people, 15 on average per town hall, participated in these town hall meetings. They were also live streamed on Facebook, and with other social media efforts, were able to reach thousands of people. Next slide, please. Our focus group sessions created a safe space for conversations. As you can see from these demographics, most of the attendees were young people from the Black, East, Southeast Asian, and South Asian communities, and many were not born in Canada. It was critical that our focus group partners hosted individuals who would live experiences that could properly inform our strategy. We also made a point of having no police presence at these sessions, so community members could freely express their views and engage in deeper conversations about this race-based data collection strategy. Next slide. I will turn it over to Biha and Maya.
Thank you, Deputy. A range of key themes emerge from all these engagement sessions Deputy Yuan described, and I'll walk you through some of these themes in broad strokes, and we invite you to check the report for more details. The report is available online, and if you'd like to get a hard copy, please email us and we'll provide copies to you. One of the key themes we hear through this conversation was around trust and reconciliation. Community members emphasize the need for the service to acknowledge its mistakes and harm caused. They see it as an act of humility that validates their experiences, and it is also an important step to reconciliation with various communities. Participants also emphasize that trust is a key ingredient to the success of the race-based data collection strategy, and they also hope that this strategy will help improving the relationship between the residents and police. Community members also made it clear that they would like to stay engaged throughout the entire process of strategy implementation. People expect the service to establish a process that allows the public to stay engaged and being able to provide feedback across different stages of the strategy. Next slide, please. Throughout this series of community engagements, people consistently voice their concerns about why the data is collected, how it's protected, and how it will be used. Several participants questioned the need for collecting new data without taking concrete action, as they felt that there are already several high-profile reports that documented systemic racism in policing. They would like to see instead more concrete actions to address systemic racism. Community members were also concerned that the service might not be using the data in good faith. They worried that the data will be used to further stigmatize certain communities, and they also questioned whether one strategy would be enough to address systemic racism. Despite skepticism and concerns, many participants regarded the strategy as an opportunity to hold the service accountable for its actions in community. They see it as an opportunity to support the police officers to develop cultural awareness and skills to better interact with diverse groups. And they also hope that the strategy will provide evidence to bring more resources into certain disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. The next one. Focus group especially provided the space for more in-depth conversations around different ways of collecting data. And participants debated the merits of perceptions versus self-reported data collection. Many participants regarded self-identification data on one hand as more accurate compared to perception data and more respectful as people have the opportunity to self-identify instead of being labeled by others. On the other hand, many people were reluctant to share their information, being concerned that they might be treated differently once sharing their information. Throughout this range of conversation during the focus groups, participants also provided nuanced feedback about a range of factors that would influence their decisions about sharing or not sharing their information. A key factor was the why behind the officer's request. That's critical. People emphasize that they need to understand why they are asked for their information and how that information is relevant to their specific interaction with police. Participants also indicated that they would feel more comfortable to provide this information to a neighborhood community officer rather than to other police officers. And timing of the request is also critical. And as we can see on the graph on the bottom right, most of participants reported that they would prefer to be asked about their information either at the end of the interaction or after the interaction being the most preferred option. So this is in broad strokes what we heard from you, and as I mentioned before, please check the report for more details. And I will turning back to the deputy to tell you more about the service commitment to act upon what you told us. Next.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. I added it. Will. Good to go? Okay. Thank you. So I think we need to go to the next slide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So what have we done with this feedback? When it comes to relationship building, we are committed to developing a dedicated Indigenous engagement strategy in collaboration with Indigenous groups. Committed to developing mechanisms that facilitate engagement with young people, those living with disabilities, including mental health and other members of vulnerable groups. Developing a public awareness campaign to reach out to diverse communities and clearly communicate the scope, relevance, and key undertakings under the strategy. Creating a community advisory panel comprised of community members with lived experiences, academics, and subject matter experts who will work closely with the service to advise data analysis, interpretation of results, and reporting. We had over 300 applications for this panel, and we are expecting to have this group in place by January 2021. When it comes to the management of data, we are developing an analytical framework to guide the analysis of race and identity-based data, and will engage internal and external stakeholders to reflect operational and community realities. We are procuring an independent third party to conduct and publish an independent data analysis. And lastly, we are developing an open data framework to provide public access to de-identified data and analytics for the research, policymaking, and advocacy. Next slide, please. We heard tremendous amount of feedback when it comes to training of our officers, including how critical it is for service members to understand the purpose and the foundation and the fundamental concepts of race and identity-based data collection to promote bias-free policing and enhance community trust. The service is in the process of developing a training curriculum that builds on community feedback, and it will roll out the training across the entire service to enable transformation from within. We have implemented multiple training delivery methods because we know this topic is too important for just online training. The community told us clearly at our initial consultations that online training would not be enough. We have delivered technical briefings for those members and supervisors who need to understand the legislative requirements in a deep and meaningful way. We have implemented Indigenous experiences, anti-Black racism, and implicit bias training into the yearly requirement for all police officers. Our senior officers have received training on issues of equity and inclusion, as well as the race-based data collection, and we're providing both online and in-person training for our members. As the strategy evolves and we continue to engage with our communities, our training program will evolve and grow as well. Now I turn back to Miha and Mai for the next several slides.
Thank you, Deputy. If you can advance to the next slide, I will talk about the data management and protection aspects of the strategy that we heard from the public, the importance of protecting people's privacy and their questions around how will we handle the data. People were concerned also about data quality. It has to be accurate to give us reliable results that can be trusted. The service looked at our data systems and practices and developed procedures to assess and handle race-based data in a secure and protected way and prevent its misuse. We engage with the Information and Privacy Commissioner and stakeholders on best practices to ensure that we also address concerns about data quality and retention so that we can analyze long-term trends and monitor changes over time. So the procedures that we developed involved the entire life cycle of data, from the time the data is collected and recorded by officers to the verification and approval process by supervisors and officers in charge at the divisions. We have secure data management systems to store and protect that data, including long-standing cybersecurity policies that protect all the information that the service holds. Data also needs to be compiled and anonymized for use in analyses. We have developed procedures and designated specific staff to have authorized access to prepare and further assess these data sets before using it in analysis. Designated staff are also identified who will be responsible for securely retaining these data sets for 20 years. Next slide, please. So now we get to the part of the presentation where we'd like to hear from you on more of the next steps in the data strategy. Next steps, please. The question of how will TPS analyze the data is a critical one. Race-based data analysis helps to support training and to monitor and evaluate and improve policies, procedures, and practices. For trusted results, analysis has to be done in an open, transparent, and fair way. Hence, we are creating an analysis framework to guide our approach at looking at the data, and we need your advice. Analysis should be grounded in the principles that are important and that reflect our priorities. So, for example, in taking a principled approach to data analysis, we need to center race and racial disparities when we are looking at the data. This means that we are also taking an intersectional lens in order to understand unique experiences that are based on a combination of different aspects of individuals' lived experiences. So that means looking at race, but not just race, race and gender, race and disabilities and mental health, and all of the other aspects that inform a person's experiences. Another important principle is that analysis should reflect engagement with stakeholders, with communities, and with our internal members, as Deputy said, in order to get all the different perspectives at the table and understand the operational realities and contexts that may be behind certain patterns. Another important principle is to use sound methods in our analyses that reflect best practices and innovative and accepted techniques in policing research. Critical aspect of the principles is also that analysis should be solution-oriented. This means that we ask the right questions in order to lead to actionable insights that can support positive change. It also means that analysis and interpretation is systems-focused and does not stigmatize communities. So our question to you is, what principles do you think should guide our analysis of the data? Please send us your comments in the chat boxes. If you're using WebEx, you can also raise your hand and we can activate your mic so you can speak and comment. And we'll just give a few minutes to see for people to type in their comments. Okay, as we wait for comments and questions to be inputted, I want to take us into a deeper dive on one of the principles that we've identified, the reflect engagement principle. We need to engage often and in a meaningful way to understand what is going on holistically. Collaborative, community-based analysis means that all stakeholders are involved and have a real opportunity to inform the analysis as well as the interpretation of results. Reality will always be more complicated than the data can reflect, and there are many ways to understand things. We will engage with affected communities and individuals with lived experiences, including diverse members of the city and our officers. So to understand specific interactions, we will look at contexts and factors that may be involved. For example, situational factors like time of day, day of year, type of incident, type of offense or violation involved. We will also look at individual factors like gender, age, race, mental health, physical condition, behaviors, etc. Where possible, we will also look at officer factors such as rank, years of service, etc., to understand dynamics that may be at play. And lastly, but not least, we will also look at contextual factors such as neighborhood and division characteristics that might influence outcomes or be able to explain certain patterns. So that's what we mean by reflecting engagement. In order to tell the whole story, everyone's perspectives are needed to understand the results, and that includes your perspectives, the public's perspectives. So we ask you, in order to understand the results from your point of view, what should we consider? Again, you're welcome to enter your comments in the chat boxes or raise your hand and we can enable your mic so that you can speak. And I'll just give a few minutes for that.
Dr. Pham, we do have one comment in the chat section that has been sent to us saying that transparency should be an important guiding piece and that they would suggest that the findings be shared with the community. Perhaps you or Deputy Ewan could speak to the services plans in that regard.
Let me take a stab at this, and Dr. Pham will also certainly very capable in assisting to round out my answers. As the board directed the service in terms of this important policy, the board has established a community advice committee that we heard from you that we have received over 300 applicants. This is a civilian oversight that will oversee our data collection, how we analyze it, type of analytic, how we store it. And also the board has mandated the Toronto Police Service to report on these stats each and every year by way of a public reporting on the number of the numbers and how we use and how we store these data. So this is an extremely transparent process that the public get to understand each and every year how the Toronto Police Service will manage the data collection. So I think Dr. Pham may want to add to my answer.
Thanks. And I think the deputy had mentioned earlier that open data and open analytics is a critical aspect of the strategy. So we will be sharing data in a de-identified format so that individual privacy is protected and have it available for the public and members of interested parties and organizations to use the data as well and take a look at it to answer their own questions, to challenge our results and analysis, and to work together with us in a collaborative way in a public manner to understand our impact and understand where we can improve police services. Absolutely. I think as more and more government bodies pick up on open data as a principle, we will start to see more information that's out there that can help us to piece together a fuller picture and understand all of the complexities of social reality. So making use of available data to add richness and context to our own data will only help us to better understand our own impact, but also where we can have opportunities to work with other organizations and other parties to have a more holistic impact on social issues.
What elements of the data collected would be released as open data on the TPS?
Well, I think this question is more for Dr. Fan and her team to address the open data portal and in the storage of the data and what type of data that the public can certainly see.
Sure, thank you. And I'll point to the anti-racism data standards too that provides guidance for all public sector organizations regulated under the Anti-Racism Act on what types of data should be and are mandated to be released as open data. And that includes all data collected about race, ethnicity, indigenous identity, religion that's collected by an organization, but also the information that relates to an outcome of a public service. So in the case of TPS's our race-based data collection strategy, use of force data and strip searches is part of our phase 1 implementation. And so information related to use of force outcomes and strip searches, along with race information, officer perception data, would definitely be part of the open data, open analytics approach. And where we are using other data as part of our analysis, for example, where gender is also collected and available and part of our analysis, age, neighborhood, location of incident, for example, then that will also be released as open data so that the public has the same data that we have and use in our analysis.
Thank you. Our next question is, can you release the data collected from the consultation process as open data, i.e. comments made by community members in a de-identified way? Perhaps Miha, you could speak to the copy of the report from the community engagement sessions and where that can be found.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned before, we have a more detailed analysis included in the community engagement report. And this report is available on our race-based data collection website. And we also have, I don't know if people can see it, we also have the hard copy, which can be available to you if you email us. So we'll provide the email address at the end of the presentation. And please feel free to email and we'll provide the hard copies. We've done a in-depth analysis of what we heard from you, and we want to make it sure that at different stages of the strategy implementation, we consider this feedback. That was only the first step, but as Mai mentioned, we'll take into account into our data analysis plans. Also later on in our self-identification pilot, so we'll consider all this feedback throughout, and we'll continue getting back to you on how we integrate it, and we'll continue to integrate your feedback. Thank you.
Deputy Ewan, with respect to training for service members, what organization or professional body is providing the training?
Well, I'll take a stab at this first. First of all, the training is in the design stage, and we have engaged a number of community groups and academic experts, and the curriculum is being put together for the second stage of the self-identifying, and also our anti-Black racism. We've engaged Wellesley Institute and other academics such as Ryerson and also community groups to inform us the proper curriculum. And you heard me state it earlier that we are now fully engaged with the Indigenous community, so their expertise will be provided to us to guide us in the development and the training. And I want to stress race-based data or anti-racism training is not a one-time event; it's a continuous event. So we'll continue to look for the best partnership that we can have to ensure that we are the leading service in Ontario in delivering this type of services, this type of training to our officers and civilian members.
Dr. Fan, did you have anything to add?
No.
Our next question, will this video session and a transcript be made available to those who could not attend? So I can probably answer that. The answer is the live stream that we're showing on YouTube this evening will be available on the Toronto Police Services YouTube channel later on. So anybody will be able to go on and watch the session again. This is also the first in a series of 4 community engagement sessions that we're having. Next one is tomorrow night, and then we have 2 next week, next Tuesday and next Thursday, I believe. There is a media advisory on the Toronto Police Services website with dates and times and links to attend again. Dr. Fan, we'll move on to the next slide then while we wait for other questions to come in.
Thank you so much for all those questions. So as I mentioned, we have implemented phase 1 starting January 1st last year. And we started with inclusion of strip searches and use of force reports under the race-based data collection strategy to understand our impacts in these 2 critically important areas. For phase 2, we've committed to, in January 1st, 2021, to start collecting in other interactions that the public may be interested in and prioritize for us to better understand if there are systemic barriers and systemic racial biases potentially in the outcomes as a result of these other interactions. So our question to you, what police interactions do you think we should focus on next and add to our analysis and public reporting? I'll leave a few minutes for folks to comment in the chat boxes or raise their hand for comments.
Okay, with no questions coming in, Dr. Fan, would you like to continue?
Sure. So while we are waiting for your thoughts on what other interactions are important and should be prioritized for phase 2, I just wanted to share that during the focus groups early this year, we did ask participants about their preferences for other interactions where we should collect officer perception or self-ID. And the top 3 responses we got at those sessions were for us to focus on arrests, charges, and 911 calls. And so we are examining our systems to see how feasible it is to start collecting in those areas. And we'll consider those preferences by the public, but we also know that other important stakeholders such as the OHRC and other reports in the past written about concerns with systemic racism in criminal justice system has also pointed to certain interactions for priority 2. So we have some direction, and we would like to hear more from you in that regard. So while we wait for any questions or comments to come, can we advance to the next slide? That is the end of our presentation, and I do have a poll question that I want to bring to you. And please raise your hand if it's a yes. So the question is, after today, will you talk to your friends and family about race and identity data to help police identify and address any systemic issues in policing and help us to improve our services to the City of Toronto? Raise your hands for a yes. And I hope all of you will have these conversations and think constructively about how you can support and be part of a solution as we become modernized and become even more professional and equitable. You can also email us at inclusionData@torontopolice.on.ca with feedback on this session and the questions that we brought before you today. We look forward to hearing from you. So I just wanted to open the floor to any questions and comments at the end of our presentation. And for Deputy Yuen, if you have any final parting words.
Certainly, thank you. This is an important conversation. I stated earlier, this is one piece, this legislation helps police and our communities build trust. And I've been a police officer for more than 30 years. One of the most critical foundation of providing services to our communities based on trust, mutual trust. And race-based data collection will build that trust, and along with our human interaction. So this is a continuous event. We talk about systemic racism or racism, and the time is here for us to be collectively speaking to it. And I find this to be extremely uplifting and encouraging. We're having these conversations. Yes, it's been way too late, but we're having this conversation, and I can assure the citizens of Toronto that the Toronto Police Service is serious about it. And I'm sure each and every member of our community is serious about having this conversation. So we can only improve with your participation and your advice and your guidance. So I look forward to this partnership, and this race-based data is a critical piece. And I'm going to repeat again in helping us building trust.
Again, if anybody has any questions, you can use the raise hand feature on WebEx. You could also, we have a question that's come in now. Are you capturing data on electronic or technology-mediated contacts as police interactions?
Can you expand on electronic-mediated contacts?
We're just going to ask if you could expand on your question, please, for a little bit of clarification. That would be helpful. Okay, while we wait for, as in cell phone data collection stingrays.
No. Those data are not under the ambit of the race-based data collection strategy. We are focused right now on those interactions that have traditionally been raised as a concern by communities. So that includes use of force, for example, strip searches. Those are very not electronically mediated interactions. Often they are in-person interactions with officers and expanding race-based data collection to potentially other areas, as I mentioned as an example, understanding arrests, understanding charges, discretionary charges, understanding diversions, understanding more traditional aspects of policing.
Our next question is, how exactly is the data being collected? Is it subjective, objective, via identification? Again, if we could just go over that again for one of our guests, that would be helpful too as a request.
Sure. That's a really great question. And I think the premise behind that is that data can be objective or data can be subjective. Our approach to data is understanding that all data is subjective. All data reflects our practices as human beings, our values, and the decisions we make on what metrics matter. In that regard, we are collecting currently data about officer perception of race. Now, some people would say that is subjective and not objective. However, understanding that what we are interested in is how perception matters and how perception informs decisions and interpretation of situations, interpretations of individuals. And so in this analysis of systemic barriers and systemic racial bias, it is the officer's perception that is the most useful piece of information to understand if their perception of individual's race is having an impact in their treatment of the individual in a particular interaction, and that leads to a particular outcome for that individual. We are also exploring ways to collect self-reported identities. So how does an individual understand their own identity and would report it to police? That will also be an area that we are looking into as a pilot. And that also comes with particular requirements under the anti-racism data standards. The asking of such information has to be done in a culturally respectful manner. It has to be done in a way that protects individual privacy in the moment. And so we are exploring all the considerations, risks, and mitigations, both from a citizen perspective, but also from an officer perspective, to identify when it would be appropriate to collect that kind of information, when it would not be appropriate to collect that information, and whether that information is useful for the purposes for which we want to collect it, which is to identify systemic racial bias.
Thank you, Dr. Pham. Again, just a reminder that if you have any questions, you can use the raise hand function on WebEx, or you can type your question into the chat section. Also, if you have questions or comments that you would like to make after the event ends tonight, you are welcome to email them to the Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Unit at inclusiondata@torontopolice.on.ca. That email address is also available on our race-based data website, which is tps.on.ca/race-based-data. That's also where you can find a copy of the community engagement report that Miha spoke about earlier. You can also request a hard copy of that report to be sent to you from the Toronto Police Service if you wish. We have another question. Does this strategy outline methods employed to discipline service members who are found to demonstrate racial bias? Perhaps Deputy Ewan, if you'd like to comment on that, please.
The race-based data is to inform us on systemic racism. Having said that, we do have a very comprehensive Police Services Act that speaks to racial bias policing, and we have early intervention system that will trigger alerts that our members are engaged in racial profiling incidents. So we're speaking on a data collection policy versus our disciplinary process, but the Toronto Police Service do have mechanism in place and procedures and standards in place to discipline officers required if they engage in racial bias incidents.
Thank you, Deputy. Again, I'm just giving a couple of minutes here to see if anybody else has any further questions or comments. And while we're waiting, Deputy Ewan, perhaps you could just remind our audience again about the future community engagement sessions that we have coming up.
Well, we have one tomorrow night. We'll be same time, same channel. We'll be here. Myself, Miha, and Maya, Dr. Pham will be here. And then we have two scheduled next week for, I believe, Tuesday and Thursday. Megan, is that correct?
Yes, that's
so
correct.
So tomorrow we'll be engaging with our downtown Toronto community. So I look forward to each and every conversation. Like I said it before, it's taken us a long, long time to get to this point. And I said right from the onset that anytime we speak about race, and this is a very difficult conversation. We're here. It's happening after many decades, and it shouldn't happen after many decades to speak about this important issue. So we're finally here. So please participate, engage, and let's get this right together.
Okay, with that, Deputy Ewan, I'll just ask you to offer a few parting words. I'll then ask our co-hosts, again, Phil and Sharon, if you'd like to offer a few closing words as well. Deputy Ewan?
Well, thank you for participating, and I know it's very difficult to mobilize sometimes to engage, and I know we all lead very busy lives, and I encourage, even though today is Scarborough, and you can tell your friends and the family members and people that you work with that tomorrow night will be once again live streaming this and having a virtual town hall meeting tomorrow night to talk about this important issue. So thank you for your participation. And, I don't want to single out anyone, but I want to give a shout out to some of our local councillors that have signed on. So to listen to that, and hopefully you can bring this back to your constituents in the wards that you represent.
Okay,
Dr.
Phil.
Tan?
Nothing for me. You said it all.
Oh, thank you.
Just going to ask Phil Johnson to offer a couple of words as we close out this evening's event.
Yeah, just saying thank you to all the participants for coming on and participating in this process, and thanks to the panel for coming back as they promised to report back on this important work. And this is only early days, as we know, in this process, but look forward to how we continue to build this out and making sure that it has meaningful impact for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon, can I ask if you have some parting words as well?
I just wanted to, again, thank you guys for doing this and for everyone that did come out. And also to say to the residents, I guess, of Scarborough to continue, thank you for coming out, but also to continue to look to your community agencies for support as well, because these conversations are very important to have. And we'll continue to do the work and continue to do whatever it takes so that these conversations are having as that we can move in a positive direction. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I just also want to remind everyone that even though we are live streaming on YouTube this evening, it will be available on the Toronto Police Services YouTube channel for viewing at a later date. The times for the future community engagement sessions are available on our website. We do have another one tomorrow evening starting at 6:30, and again next Tuesday and Thursday starting at 6:30 again. To close it this evening, I'm just going to ask my co-moderator, Roseanne Bailey, for her parting words.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everyone, for your patience as we went through our very, very first session, and definitely there's lots to learn from this. We definitely look forward to seeing and hearing from people again at the sessions that Megan had also mentioned. Please understand that if you have or if you had some questions that you'd like to get addressed, you can actually pose them at those sessions as well. So even though we are looking at hosting them at the 4 quadrants of the city, we're definitely welcome to have the engagement as well as you to share the information back with your community as well. We want to thank everyone for their precious time that they've loaned us today. And we'd like to just say thank you very much to our panelists as well as our community organizations for co-hosting this session with us. Have a good night, all.
Take care. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.